didn't feel like I was the right person to lead. Because, by the way, I came to that conclusion because we both think I'm the right person to make that decision. My wife was not like, oh my God, like this is so unfair. She was like, yeah, you're the right person to make that decision. Now, the problem becomes, what if you're in a marriage and you get to that point and she's like, I don't think you're the right person to make that decision. I think all emotional hell breaks loose. I don't know how he gets an erection, and I don't know how she would want to ever find herself under him. And look, maybe that's me being old. I don't know.
That goes back to my respect equals love thing. Your wife respects you because of the businessman that you were. And for that reason, she gave you the nod to make these critical decisions. And that's all I really meant by respect equals love. It's the respect. And as long as she respects you and looks up to you in the way that she wants you making those decisions, she will want to sleep with you. And that's what I meant by what I said earlier. So everything that you just said sounds good to me. Right, in fact, it's even better that you gave her more stock. Like, the money is aside, like give her the 51%, whatever. But the fact that she came to you as the decision maker, I think is ideal.
Yeah. So
and you earned it.
These are the easy parts. Now we want to get into the hard part, which is, okay, Mr. Bilyeu, if you're correct, and this is really the way to move forward, what do you do when you unshackle women, educate the shit out of them? They're better at education, so they're pulling ahead. They are usually more conscientious, more organized. So they're
easier to
be
manage
disciplined.
A lot of times, yeah.
Yep, less problematic.
More organized.
And so they fire ahead of men.
Yep.
Now what? JWaller. What do we do? Because that is the situation we find ourselves in. Women are finally, thank God, unshackled. And all of society now gets to benefit from their insights, their wisdom, their talents, all of it. But it creates a dynamic which is, at least in pockets, problematic. Because if hypergamy is real, and it does seem to be, maybe it will diminish over time. There'll probably be second and third order consequences to that. But for now, it's pretty steady that they're still going over and up. Mm-hmm. But the pool of men that qualify for over or up is diminishing by the second.
I think one or two things will happen. Either we will go back to that kind of that polygamy situation like we talked about before, or we're going to have to go all the way socialist and nobody owns anything. But either way, I think it's going to get ugly.
I don't understand how that
how they say that there's going to be some point that nobody's going to own anything and they like it. It's some bullshit that the left's putting on.
Yeah, but
but
we can derail on that.
Right. Yeah. It won't work. So, I don't think it's going to be pretty. I think there's going to be more and more men that are sexless, and I think there's going to be more and more women that have this natural urge in them, this maternal urge, the thing that God truly gifted them with, their superpower, that they're not going to be able to fulfill it. And they're going to end up working for these big corporations that allow them to freeze their eggs or have abortions or do these other things, and they're going to miss out on probably the most beautiful and most important job in the world, and that's being a mother. And also, I might add, the hardest job in the world. And it's a shame.
Do you think that will self-correct?
I think it would have to. I don't know that the powers that be don't want less people. They're worried about the climate and everything. But I think it would have to self-correct. I think as humans, we're naturally going to self-correct anything that will allow survival. So maybe we start putting incentive programs to have babies. Maybe we champion women that are...
I think they did that in Japan. I don't think it's helped.
Maybe not.
Because I think if the underlying problem persists...
The hypergamy thing.
Yeah. I'll even say it the other way. If the ideal that men strive for is weakness, is supplication, then they will... This problem will persist. And this is... So you said something earlier that actually really hit me and I like a lot. And I'm going to imagine is one of the more inflammatory things you've said, which is a real man is somebody who can go from slitting a throat to holding a baby in the same day. Yeah. I think most guys are like, word, and most women are mortified. So one of the
I disagree. I think that a woman...
Tell me more.
I think that a woman, most women, even the hard ones, even the big boss bitch women, ultimately, if the right man sits in front of her at the table and he controls his frame and he is truly meaning what he's saying, and she finds him to be competent, charming, and all the other things, that she will gladly put down the boss bitch crown and be submissive and be happy inside that role. I just don't think those men are walking around everywhere.
Interesting. I think you're going to have a PR problem.
Maybe.
So I don't know that you're wrong in the final analysis, but as I think about how do we get there? So take my own wife. One of the angles that I considered for the episode was Jordan Peterson has a really powerful idea. And he said, being harmless is not virtuous.
That's right.
And so it was like harmless men are weak was like the angle. And even my wife was like, no, that's horrible. She was like, yeah, she was like, as a woman, I want a guy to be harmless towards me. Now, I think they're wrong. And I think what my wife, who I know better than anyone on this planet, what she wants is for me to be
dangerous
covered,
to them.
Yes. Covered in the blood of my enemies. Even easier. Covered in the blood of her enemies. That I slay anyone that tries to damage her or touch this family or hurt us in some way, that I would go on the offensive and that she never has to worry.
And she's safe in your arms.
Correct. Yep. And going back to Jordan Peterson's idea of, so his whole thing, his analysis, I don't know that this is true, I'd have to look into it, but the idea of the meek shall inherit the earth. And I never understood that. And because I read meek is weak. And I was like, why on God's green earth would weak people ever inherit the earth? They're not going to. It just, the world does not work in that way. And his read is that meek in old Latin or Greek or whatever actually meant the person capable of great violence that keeps their sword sheathed. So Bruce Lee says, you know, the best way to win a fight is to not engage. But you're only choosing, going back to your idea of choice, you're only choosing whether to fight if you actually can fight. Otherwise, you're just being a coward.
That's right.
And so that to me feels like the real analysis. But the way that it's talked about, especially now, this message was approved is all about being aggressive is toxic. Like I am very stubborn about the idea of mansplaining. I'm going to mansplain whatever the fuck. Okay. Like if mansplaining.
What is that?
You actually have not heard that phrase? Wow, that's impossible. So mansplaining is where a guy is inappropriately explaining something to other people as if they don't understand it. And my read is, if you assume that somebody is doing anything other than either trying to be generous with their knowledge, or they're just excited that they know something and they want to share it, and that's a pretty natural thing to be like, oh my God, I know something about, I want to like show that I know about basket weaving or whatever. That I think is what's really going on. Anyway, that one winds me up, but that's my own hang up.
Do you know another thing that's kind of on that topic of the being strong thing, this fake virtue signaling when they're really just cowards? A lot of women fall for the mistake of the men that were like, I would never do that. There's a huge difference between not being able to get women and being loyal. And that's one thing that I find to be very hypocritical of a lot of men that will run around and talk about, I would never do that. I would never do this, this, and this. Oh no, my friend, you can't. So don't say that you're loyal when it's really just your inability to garner attention from other women. Same thing with violence. You know, don't act like you turn the other cheek if you have just not created a scenario where you're physically capable of such, you know. So I believe completely in what you're saying. I completely agree. I have a question for you.
Please.
What are your thoughts on Jordan Peterson?
So I think he's amazing. I think he tweets like a maniac. And if I could get him to stop tweeting, I would. I don't like this sort of bitterness vibe, but I think that he is once again onto something critically important, which is, okay, we've lost God at the center of our mythology and our self-understanding, and that has had critical implications. He wants to refill that hole with religion. I think that's played out, but I do think that it does have to be replaced with a shared narrative. I don't think that shared narrative has to be asking people to believe that there really is this divine creature or whatever, but I do think that we need something. It has to be shared. It is the fact that we don't share a mythology that's causing a problem, in my opinion.
I agree that Christianity is the reason that we live in civilization the way we do today. I think Christianity was very, very, very good for us as humans to work together and have morals and not kill each other and not rape and pillage. I agree with that. I also think that you're probably right that he's not going to save it religion. I do find it quite interesting that he had this huge epiphany at such an age and after something negative has happened to him. I think that's very interesting, you know, and I think a lot of people that go to Christianity wait until something bad happens and then they come out of it Christians. I find that interesting for sure.
In what way? You find it interesting? I don't know what your read is on Christianity. Good, bad, in a today context.
I believe in God.
A Christian God?
I believe that there's a God in some collective consciousness.
Can you define a God?
I think that God exists in our collective consciousness of knowing what's right and wrong and what's best for the species.
If humans were wiped out, would God cease to exist?
Probably.
Okay, so it's an idea that we all share.
But but why he's real, right? Why God's real. I heard Andrew say this and I really resonate with it. He said if you were on a ship and it wrecked and there were two islands and you could swim one or two directions and you swam towards the island of a godless island, savages, they would kill you. But if you swam left and it was a religious society and because of God, their God, they did not kill you and you lived. Is God real? And in that perspective, I think Andrew was right. Do I think there's a guy in heaven that's going to send me to hell for sleeping with women or doing stuff that people don't like sometimes or saying the truth? No, I don't. I don't. In regards to Jordan, I think it's interesting because he lived his entire life before something bad happened to him. And I just think it's kind of a system, it's a pattern. People have something bad and they run to God all of a sudden. I do think that's interesting. And what is it there that's allowing him to hold it? You know, like the bad time is over. He's probably got another book out by now. What is it for him? And then this is a genuine question that's allowing him to still hold on to it or not feel like a bit of a hypocrite inside.
So he's, assuming nothing falls apart, he's coming on the show late in the year this year. And I want to ask him precisely about this idea. Now the book he's writing is about, I think it's called temporarily anyway, those that struggle with God. Now I still don't know. I don't know how he would answer the question now. Do you believe in God? Because for a long time he said, I act as if. So in the beginning, he was like, I don't, but I act as if. Then it was just, I act as if. And now I'd be very curious to know if he's really like refound a Christian style faith, or if he looks at the Bible the way I do, which is a monomyth. It is a way for everybody in society to rally around these set of principles and ideas.
And it's very good for society in many ways.
Depending on what slots into that, yes. So Christianity has, on balance, probably been good. If you were in the middle of the Crusades and you were on the Muslim side, you probably weren't a big fan.
Right.
But I think that probably on balance, if we're really going to, and I have not looked at this problem well enough, I'm now at the edge of what I understand. I always like to disclose that. But taking the frame for a second that Western civilization really is largely born of a Judeo-Christian ethic, and that we can therefore, if society is really downstream of that belief system, and then we can look at what we have and go, okay, cool, does that good or bad? I would say Western civilization is an unbelievable miracle that yanks people out of poverty as fast as humanly possible. So yeah, I'm certainly a fan of the result.
Do you trust that he's even going to tell you the truth?
Jordan?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Aggressively. Now, I don't know Jordan well. I've interviewed him, but I've never had an interaction with him that wasn't an interview. But from everything that he pushes out, that man has taken more smoke, brought more smoke on him for just saying what he believes is true. If he's lying, bro, pick a better lie. Because this guy is like constantly embroiled in like lawsuits and governmental bodies and like, God damn, if this is him lying, holy shit. So yeah, that would just be nonsensical. So the only thing, so here's something I really share with him. There's a trifecta of books. If people have not read them, they must. You know nothing about humans until you read the following 3 books. And that is The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn, The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, and Mao, the Untold Story. And when you read those books, which are like the 3 great genocides, really, of the 20th century. It's unimaginable. It's unimaginable how evil people can be. Like how, oh God, much rather be a dog on Visqueen sliding into a crocodile's mouth.
Yeah.
Like humans can be so gnarly. It's almost impossible to imagine. And so those books just go into painstaking detail. There's another one, honorary mention, called The Red Famine. And that just happens to be basically about the same thing as the Gulag Archipelago. But in it, there was effectively a manufactured famine in the Ukraine in the 1920s. And they killed what were called the kulaks. And the kulaks were basically the successful farmers. So imagine like your high-performing entrepreneurs. When people say eat the rich, what I hear is kill the kulaks. Right. And I'm just like, bro, this experiment has been run. And in the book, this woman, they casually just mentioned this woman's walking by her neighbor's house in the middle of the winter. This is the Ukraine, okay? It's not like a winter in California.
I've been.
It's a fucking winter.
Yeah.
She's walking by her neighbor's house. She looks in the window and she sees a woman eating her 7-year-old daughter. That's what humans are capable of. And so from the lunacy of killing your best performing farmers to like, well, my daughter's only 7. If I eat her, at least I can survive. Yeah. If she eats me, she's still going to die. She's only 7, doesn't know how to do anything. So I'm just going to fucking eat her. Like, now remember, I see myself in that story and I am terrified that that line of good and evil runs through my own heart. And do I want to say that I would never? Yes. But as you were saying earlier, so humans are capable of some really, really horrendous things. And so Jordan turned me on to the Gulag Archipelago, really got me thinking about just how horrendous people can be.
Makes sense. I'll have to read those.
It's it's super intense. Now, what made you ask about Jordan Peterson?
There are times where I feel like he's a bit hypocritical.
Really?
Yeah.
Because he used to be atheist. I don't know if he ever would use that word. And now he's...
No issue with that, really. It's really more to me about running around talking about being mentally tough and then jumping on medications and having to go to rehab and things like that. Interesting. Yeah. Like he's running around telling young men to be strong and all this other shit. And then the first thing he does is go start popping pills and doesn't face it. And he also talks about being capable. I don't find him to be overly capable. I know he's an older man. I don't mean no disrespect to him. He's very well accomplished, has accomplished a lot. I would never disrespect him. But in those regards, I found him to be a bit hypocritical.
Interesting. Okay. So you and I see this very differently. Let me see if I can convince you.
Yeah.
Here's my read on Jordan for sure. And just about anybody in that position, I think I'd feel the same. So my read on Jordan is you have a very successful college professor who, as far as academics go, has an amazing career. He already has multiple streams of revenue because he is extraordinarily smart. He wrote his book on mythology, Maps of Meaning, as a storyteller. Like that's one of the most profound books I've read. It's just
didn't say you wasn't talented.
Unbelievable. No, we'll get there. But like, I'm trying to paint a picture of somebody who has everything going for him. His life is amazing.
He does. He's stud.
But this is back right before Bill C-16. So pre-Bill C-16, all this going for him, doing great, taught at Harvard for a while. I mean, you don't get a better academic career. He's got a private practice. He's helping a lot of people, turning around lives. He spent, I forget how many hours he said, something like 32 hours trying to teach a man with, I think, an 84 IQ how to fold paper and put it in an envelope. Like, this is a guy that has really gone out of his way to help humanity.
Great man.
So you got to bear with me. I'll get there. So, because what I'm building towards is hypocrisy.
Okay, cool.
So he's got this life. Now Bill C-16 pops up. He's read the Gulag Archipelago. He's read Mao, the Untold Story. He knows the rise and fall of the Third Reich. He knows what humans are capable of. And he believes, and not to put words in his mouth, this is my interpretation, that he believes that all it takes for all hell to break loose is for good men to remain silent in that moment where it's going to be self-destructive to stand up for what you believe is true. And so he says, hey,
I don't think we're far from that now.
Agreed. I think he was the tip of the spear. Yeah. So he ends up standing up for it. And for all intents and purposes, it ends up working out okay in many ways. But for all intents and purposes, he has devastating consequences in his life. I mean, just blows his life up, gets one of the biggest cancellations you're ever going to see. I mean, just ruthless. And he builds back, and I think he says now he's got like 10 lawsuits happening at once. I mean, for him to stand up and speak about what he thinks is true, he has paid an extraordinary price. Now, if he is right, that all it takes for evil to take over is for good men to say nothing, then sort of whether somebody reads his actions as hypocritical or not, he's done this amazing service. Okay, in my view.
Agreed.
So he pays this tremendous price, does this very important thing. Now, let's say his wife gets diagnosed, his wife gets diagnosed in the middle of all this madness. His wife gets diagnosed with cancer, and all of a sudden he has anxiety just overwhelming him. Now, I have to imagine the vast majority of humanity has anxiety way before that moment. And so he struggles. Now, could we really say that Jordan has not worked on being mentally tough? That seems insane to me. But here's a guy who's like, I'm going to take every tool that's available to me. And drugs are one of the tools available to me. Now, I would advise him and anybody that will listen to me, do not take a drug that you have to take every day. I don't take anything every day except Zyrtec, which is an antihistamine. And even that, I'm like, I shouldn't be taking this every day. So I don't think people should take any substance every day. But if you have an anxiety or depression disorder and you have not mastered it yet, and you need in acute situations a pharmacological intervention, I'm all for that. Now, I think he would agree that the way he went about it was foolish, and I doubt he'd do it again. But with all of that crashing down on him, the fact that he has a breaking point, like everybody has a breaking point. The fact that he used an exogenous substance to try to deal with it, like whatever, use everything at your disposal. And I agree with that, use everything at your disposal. To the point of, for sure, if I ever needed drugs, I would do it. I would try to do everything in my power first, for sure. But as somebody that dealt with profound anxiety, and the only reason I didn't take anxiety medication at the height of that was because I was so terrified. I didn't take daily anxiety medication. I was so terrified of taking anything daily. But acute, yes. I was like, dude, I don't know what the fuck is going on, but I feel like I'm in a constant state of dread, and I don't know why. Now, what it ended up being is my diet, but at the time I didn't know that. I had no idea. So I felt completely lost in the woods. Now, but I still, even though I wasn't on camera at the time, I still would tell people, anybody who'd listen, you got to be toughening your mind. I'm saying it to myself. And I'm like, but I was very open. I have this anxiety. I don't know why the fuck. I'm working through it. It doesn't feel critical to me.
And there we are.
Yeah.
Do you feel like he was as transparent as you are right now?
I agree. Never hit me that he was. I didn't know that he was or wasn't talking about.
I agree with everything you just said. My problem, not even really a problem, because I don't have a problem with him. The inconsistency I see is that he was not as transparent as you are right now.
It didn't hit me weird at all. So one, when I look at humans, I assume they are deeply flawed, and Jordan Peterson and Tom Bilyeu
and Justin Waller,
for sure,
completely flawed,
deeply flawed
every way.
So man, I look at him, if I'm being honest, even though I look at things like his tweets and they make me angry because I'm like, Jordan, what the fuck are you doing? He did a whole podcast about how he tweets like a psychopath and he should probably stop. Yes, you should. It was a great podcast, by the way, Jordan. Take that advice. But I really do believe that he has been, and I get made fun of. I'm not sure what the right word is. I think people that stand up for what they believe in are brave. And that for a long time, Justin Waller, I hid behind my guests on my own interview show. And I didn't say what I believed. And if people were saying something that I thought, that's fucking crazy, I just stayed quiet. And I was like, I'm going to edit that out. And then I started, when COVID kicked off, I felt like a coward. And I didn't like that feeling. And so I was like, well, now I'm going to have to start talking about this. And I didn't want to, because I was looking at Jordan Peterson. Understand, you don't know this about me. You asked me about this before we started rolling. I never got to the punchline. This shirt is a character I created in the video game that we're building. And that is the joy of my life, is telling stories that empower people. So anyway, I want to be the next Walt Disney, man.
Yeah.
And I know that I've said 90 things in this podcast alone that are going to make a certain set of people never want to interact with my games or whatever.
Right.
And that makes me sad. But I don't want to be a coward.
It makes me happy for you, because I feel like the truest form of living life is living life on your own terms and speaking your truth. One thing I've learned about going on social media is that, yeah, maybe some people hate me, but I get 10x love and a deeper love from people that really appreciate me for who I actually am.
Mm-hmm.
And so for that reason, you'll have a cult following of people that play your game. And anybody else was going to wait till you said something else they didn't like and bail on you anyway. So fuck them.
That is the final analysis. But you and I both know that if you're going to get anywhere useful in life, you can't lead with your emotions.
Correct.
And so you might think, fuck them. But for everybody listening, I would highly encourage you to move through life with integrity and strategy. You can't just be a dumbass bull in a china shop that says whatever the fuck all the time.
What have you said on this podcast that was not integrity?
I've been entirely in integrity in this podcast.
Exactly. So if those people were to not play your video game because you just stated the truth, aren't you still in integrity, and aren't they just going to hate you later when you say something else they don't like?
Okay. I'm going to give, since you're his friend, I'm going to give Andrew Tate advice through you. Dear Andrew, you're very smart and you're going to positively impact a lot of people. But the way that you frame things in such an inflammatory way is fucking moronic.
Okay.
Because you brought a lot of attention. But now, let's assume, and I don't know, I know you do, and I know you are 100% convinced that he's innocent. And I love that. Even if you're wrong, I love that you're loyal and all that. So no disrespect. I don't know the fucking guy, never met him, nothing. But he's on camera saying things that I would have advised him not to say ever, even if he's joking. So he has, by not being as strategic as he should have been, and I've heard him admit, he always couches it, seeing how influential I am now, I would have said things differently. Yes, very wise. Because the reality is the way that he has purported himself, again, assuming that he did not do these things, the way that he put himself out there, got him a huge following and made him a literal enemy of the state. And at some point, man, that was not as strategic of a move as it could have been. So there, I'm just like, you need to have integrity. You need to say what is true, but you also need to be real. What is the world really like? And you talk about that. You want your kids to know what the world is really like. And the world is really like. There are other powerful forces out there. And if you pretend that they're not, you're going to get blindsided by dumb shit that you could have avoided.
End of message.
End of message.
Okay. Message as Andrew's friend. Andrew may have said some things that that might not serve him now. He might have said them very loudly when he had a small following. Andrew, like Jordan, is not perfect, but I do think he's a greater good than Jordan. That's going to piss some people off.
Fine.
But I can tell you right now, Andrew's faced just as much as Jordan, if
At
not
this
more,
point, probably more.
if not more, keeping a completely sober mind, doing push-ups, having young men get better all over the world, despite the fact that he's the enemy of the state.
Mm-hmm.
He's turned it around and has helped many young men go to Islam. Whether you agree with that or not is, I guess, a non-issue, but it is definitely a stronger path than degeneracy. Getting them fit, teaching them to make money all over the world in the real world, which I also promote. Mm-hmm. And I would argue that Andrew Tate is one of the greatest forces for good and truth that exists in the world today, in front of your friend Jordan.
So on that, I would say, so again, I don't know Andrew, so take all of my comments with a grain of salt as somebody who's not an Andrew scholar. But looking at it from the outside, I see hypocrisy in his actions and I don't know Islam well enough. So again, I'm a headline reader right now, but at a headline reader level, him saying that, women shouldn't be on OnlyFans, but then profiting off of women being on OnlyFans does not strike me as non-hypocritical. Also, and I think this is like, so when I look at Jordan and Jordan saying, yeah, fuck, I needed the medication and I had to do it. And I never read it as he wasn't being honest. I don't know if he talked about it or whatever, but I was impressed when Andrew wrote the tweet saying, I can't remember if he said one day he said, I almost cried in jail today, almost. And I thought, whoa, like he's actually being honest and he's being vulnerable. And then the other day he put out a post, and this is pretty recent. He's back home under house arrest. And he said, I haven't slept more than 45 minutes a night because I'm so worried. I don't remember if he used the word worried, but it was like, okay, whoa, like obviously this is really weighing on him and all that. Now, that was not a signal to me that you have a person with a weak mind, nor is it a signal to me that Jordan having anxiety is a signal of a person with a weak mind. Now, if Jordan had been screaming from the rooftops, anybody that's on pharmacology is a fucking idiot, and what are you doing? And that makes you weak and bad. And then it came out that he was using it. I have to imagine if he didn't out and out say, I've prescribed this to my patients and it's helped a lot of people. When I heard he was on it, I was like, oh yeah, like it didn't even make my radar as like, oh, that doesn't mean that you're strong anymore. Plus, let's say that Jordan is the weakest person in the world. I would still,
which I don't believe.